What is the greatest fuck it, I'll do it myself in history? Juan Pujol Garca was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during World War II. Initially, he approached British and American intelligence to offer them his services. But both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garca created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official and got himself recruited by the Nazis, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garca created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents using publicly available information like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence, and he was finally recruited. Garca continued his work throughout the war, and for the same operation, he received both a knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross from Nazi Germany. The Nazis never realized that he was a double agent. In 1947, a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place. And then he sailed that boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. Morris Hillman invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963, his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally. Nikola Tesla was tasked with lighting up the World's Fair, but Thomas Edison wouldn't allow him to use any of his patents, so Tesla had to invent a new light bulb that didn't use any of Edison's patents and could still have thousands made in time for the event. Jon Snow, not that one. The father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. Edit. Corrected the location. Otis invented pretty much what we consider the modern elevator. Nobody was convinced it was safe, so he hoisted himself up extremely high and had somebody cut the cable with an axe to prove how confident he was that the elevator was safe regardless of almost worst case scenarios. The doctor stationed in Antarctica that removed his own appendix. Goddamn. I think in that scenario, I would have just died to a burst appendix. Probably would have tried to get myself nice and unconscious first, if I could. I'm not performing vivisection on myself, though. Cliff Stoll, the cuckoo's egg, noticed weird traffic on his university servers. No one believed him that there was any risk occurring. Ended up uncovering a major hacking attempt to steal missile designs and basically created internet security. I think it was missile designs. It's been a long time. I bought Klein bottle earrings from this guy. He sells all different sizes. He sent me pictures of his cat along with them. I don't know if I'm allowed to post links to a shop here, but if you search for Acme Klein bottles, that's his site. In 1888, Alman Brown Strowger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Strowger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Strowger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system which allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. James Clerk Maxwell was idolized by Einstein as being the father of modern physics. Not only did he formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, but just for shits and giggles he calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s did we get confirmation that Maxwell was right. He then calculated how to take a color photograph in 1855. This was then achieved in 1861 and is recognized as the first ever color photograph. Probably the time Nando Pirado and Roberto Canessa decided they couldn't wait around any longer and legged it for 10 days across the Andes with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food except some scraps of their dead friends stuffed into a sock. They finally found someone out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 months. They needed help for the other survivors who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends. Jonas Salk needed human subjects to test his polio vaccine. That's normally a long process and he wanted to make the vaccine available as quick as possible, so he just experimented on himself. He also didn't patent the polio vaccine, I believe, and he tried to help fight the AIDS epidemic even before he died. Henry VIII couldn't get his way with the Pope, so he made the Church of England so he could do what he wanted. This man legit made his own damn religion, which millions still follow today, just so he could cheat on his wife. Edit. He was already cheating on his wife. He wanted to divorce her to marry his mistress. Not a very old story. Manjhiol the mountain man lived in a very remote village of India whose route to nearby was blocked a mountain, and hence villagers had to climb it every time. And they had to do that daily to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried first to persuade the gov to do a mountain tunnel project there, but to vain. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10 plus years and finally succeeded. There is a Bollywood movie on him too. Title: Manjhi, the Mountain Man. When Julius Caesar decided to just up and King march into Rome to declare himself the military leader. Or how about his Rhine bridges that he built in a few days to cross an army over a river, then went back over and demolished it just because his army could. It's said the Germanic tribes saw his army do this and basically shit themselves. Imagine being some nomadic tribe and an invading force comes to a river, builds an entire bridge, crosses it, shits in your land, and then goes back home and destroys the entire bridge all in less than a week. Donald Knuth is one of the big names in computer science. Back in the 1960s he set out to write the definitive texts on computer programming and analysis of algorithms. The first 3 volumes came out and he started the 4th in the early mid-1970s. He was unhappy with how the newer printing editions were typeset, and so he took a summer to solve that problem. A decade later the 4th volume still had not been completed. But as a consolation prize we got TeX, later extended to the more commonly used LaTeX. Without question the most comprehensive and powerful language for creating documents with heavy technical requirements. It is a strange mix of a markup language like HTML and a compiled language like C. It is completely free and has been for well over 30 years and is probably the most bug-free piece of software I've ever seen. Certainly for its size and scope. There's not much out there of comparable quality. There is literally no mathematics that cannot be properly typeset in TeX LaTeX. Its default style is instantly recognizable to any working mathematician. It is used across nearly all STEM fields and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of journals that only accept manuscripts written in LaTeX. It wasn't until the early 2000s that drafts of the 4th volume started to appear. Nobody has seemed to mind. During the American Revolution, John Paul Jones sailed over to England to burn down British naval ships. He succeeded, of course, and made back safely. After the revolution he was even pardoned by the town that he burned most of the ships in. John Paul Jones was a madman, badass and basically a pirate since he pillaged lots of villages too. Almost died a bunch. I think the pardon was in the 1990s. I'm surprised no one's mentioned Catherine the Great of Russia. She decided her husband was useless, which, granted, he was, and proceeded to set up a military coup to overthrow him. Even with the plan being discovered early, she dressed herself in military garb and marched with her new army, which had just sworn loyalty to her, down to Peter's palace, where he was forced to resign the throne, all without a single drop of bloodshed. At least until Peter turned up dead some time later under shady circumstances, but honestly for a military coup it was pretty non-violent. If saying fuck it, I'm ruling Russia myself isn't great, I dunno what is. I mean, it's right there next to her name for a reason. Desmond Doss single-handedly saved from 50 to 100 men up on Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa. His company was ordered to retreat when they were attacked by the Japanese, but instead he said nah, stayed up on the ridge alone, unarmed, and dragged as many soldiers as he could to safety without any help. Even when he was shot by a sniper and riddled with shrapnel, he made sure they took another guy down the hillside before him. Edit. I'm aware there is a movie. I've read about him before and I know he's done more than just what is in the movie. I just didn't want to make a 3,000 word post about the many ways this guy is amazing. The guy who started FedEx wrote a college paper about a nationwide overnight shipping company and got a C. Started the company anyways. Later, after he started it and it was struggling, he couldn't get a loan and the company was almost bankrupt. And he bet next week's payroll at the casino on roulette and won. Also got a silver star in the Vietnam War and now co-owns the Washington Redskins. The latter often viewed as the biggest failure in his life. The dude in the war with wounded fingers. A doctor wouldn't amputate them, so he bit them off himself. My great grandpa did the opposite. They were gonna amputate his feet in World War II and he said nah, so he went AWOL and treated his wounded feet on his own. When he came back with 2 perfectly good feet, he basically said, I wanted to keep my feet and I wanted to keep fighting, and as far as I know he didn't get any kind of punishment, even though he was gone for weeks. Closest I can think of is Erwin Rommel during the Blitzkrieg seeing an opportunity to make an exploit and instead of waiting said FCK it and charged 200 miles into French territory. Which is interesting since in World War I the German leader, can't remember his name, pushed beyond where he was supposed to since the French resistance sucked. But it partially cost them the war for overextending. Clara Lemlich taking the stage at a union meeting in 1909 to declare a general strike after the older male union leaders told the working girls that there really wasn't a point in striking and it would be too hard. Just be patient and deal with it. So 20-year-old Clara interrupts them, climbs up on the stage, and shouts at the crowd that she's tired of just talk. Time to strike. And everyone went for it. Instant agreement of the workers. Whoa. This got some attention. So editing to add that, I dug up my old research. A translation of what she said, originally in Yiddish, was I have listened to all the speeches and I have no further patience for talk. I, too, have worked and suffered. And I am tired of talk. I move that we go on general strike. Now. Double quote. Metallica fired Dave Mustaine, 1983, because he was sort of a control freak and wanted to take the band in a more prog jazz metal direction. He was also abusing drugs and was known for violent behavior at the time. He went off and created his own band Megadeth, and over the next 30 plus years he's sold millions of albums and toured the whole world writing and controlling pretty much everything he's ever wanted. It seems they've all now patched things up. Dude is an absolute genius beast of a guitarist-songwriter. Also, when guitarist Hillel Slovak died, 1988, John Frusciante was a 19-year-old kid and a huge fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He was heartbroken and didn't want to see the end of his favorite band. So he went and auditioned to play lead guitar. He got the gig. Helped take them to the top of the charts. The rest is history. Today he's considered one of the greatest rock guitarists out there. Alexander the Great solving the Gordian knot by cutting it with his sword. Alexander loved to do things like this. During the Malian campaign near the end of his conquests, his army was besieging a citadel. Alexander thought the battle was taking too long. So he took a ladder, climbed up the citadel wall himself, and suicidally jumped over the wall into the heart of the enemy garrison. He sustained awful injuries during this battle, but perhaps in part due to his recklessness, his army was able to complete the siege of the citadel. Let's not forget that Isaac Newton ran out of math to work with and was like, I guess I'll just invent calculus then. He was self-quarantined during the plague. Wasn't there that Russian, of course he was Russian, doctor that did stomach surgery on himself? With only a bottle of vodka for an aesthetic. He was stuck in Antarctica and was the only doctor available. He got a group of people to hold mirrors and hand him stuff and had another group for if anyone passed out. He then took out his own appendix. Martine Rothblatt, founder of SiriusXM and unbelievable polymath, was told her aortic genesis had 3 months to live. She had been diagnosed with a type of pulmonary arterial hypertension which was fatal. Theodisease causes too much pressure in the blood vessels leading from the heart to the lungs, causing them to narrow and not carry enough oxygen. So Rothblatt quit all of her other work and went to the library to save her daughter. Even though she had zero background in the field, she figured out a cure and in the process founded United Therapeutics, which is a $1 billion biotechnology company. Rothblatt's life story is amazing. Lamborghini building cars because FCK Ferrari. The owner of Lamborghini ran a successful tractor company. When he asked Enzo Ferrari to make some customizations to a vehicle he was about to purchase, Enzo replied with something along the lines of, "You should stick to what you know, tractor boy." Double quote. Thus, the Lamborghini car company was started and allows customers to customize almost any feature of their vehicle. The first thing that comes to thought here is the Louisiana Purchase. Congress planned on buying a small piece of the available land, but Jefferson used some interpretation fuckery to double the size of the US without congressional approval. The Soviet woman that lost her husband to the Nazis sold everything and to pay for a tank with the request that she gets to drive it to fight Nazis. Go read up about Maria Oktyabrskaya on Wikipedia. Here's a notable mention, albeit somewhat obscure. Sam Regenstrief once made 40% of the dishwashers in the USA at the time. He fell ill with a kidney stone and went to his local hospital in Indiana. Upon leaving, he was disgusted by the waiting times and quality of care. He took matters into his own hands and created a hospital and founded the Regenstrief Institute. This institute helped map the genome of COVID-19 and translated its finding into 20+ languages, helping the world fight this virus. Edit. Showering me with all the treasure. My first time gold and silver. I'm thrilled. Stanislav Petrov making the decision not to push the button to launch nuclear missiles, as would have been his direct orders when the Russian early warning system wrongly indicated the launch of American missiles in 1983. One man saved the entire world from nuclear destruction. So this is undeniably the greatest of these moments in all human history. There should be a statue of him in every major city around the world. Edit. Spelling. Edit. More spelling. During the American Civil War, General McClellan was in charge of the Army of the Potomac. He was an overcautious kind of officer, and he wasn't doing enough to move against Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. Lincoln got fed up with the inaction and wrote him a letter in which he asked his general if he could borrow the army, since you're not using it for anything. Double quote. Dave Grohl, the drummer for Nirvana, became unemployed after the lead singer killed himself while on copious amounts of drugs. Shortly thereafter he created a new band for which there were no members yet other than himself. He written the music, lyrics and well as played vocals, backup vocals, drums, bass and guitar by himself. Foo Fighters' name was an afterthought so people wouldn't recognize him right away as a member of Nirvana. The self-titled album Foo Fighters is also the second highest selling album by the 25-year career of the band.